Good morning, all. Mary Bulger here, naturalist with Iowa County Conservation, and I want to welcome you to our Monday morning Critters Live. This morning we are going to be learning about the fox snake. And as always, because we are doing this live on our Facebook page, if you have any questions as we're going along, if you want to say hi, go ahead and write those in the comments. I'd be happy and do my best to answer those questions for you. So this morning we're going to be talking about the fox snake. And so I'll have some pictures here and kind of share some interesting facts about the fox snake, where they live, what they eat, and different things like that. Have some props that we're going to look at, some skeletons and some scales and some eggs. But then we also have our live fox snake that lives here at Lake Iowa Park, so that you'll get to meet at some point today too during our program. So I'm going to bring this picture a little bit closer so you can kind of see. And this is a picture of the fox snake. The fox snake is one of our most common snakes that we have here in Iowa. And they can be found in many different habitats. So they're very versatile. So they can be found in the woodlands, on woodland areas where the woodlands end and turn into another habitat, in prairies, in meadows, near rocky outcroppings, near rivers and streams and ponds. Anywhere that can provide them shelter and food. And we'll get into a little bit more details about what they eat in just a little bit. So the fox snake, when they first hatch out of the egg, they are about the size of a pencil, just a little bit smaller, but they can grow pretty big. And I've seen fox snakes that are, 5 feet plus if they live a nice long life and they're protected. But for the most part, they start out small and they grow. And this is one of Iowa's non-venomous snakes. We don't have very many venomous snakes here in Iowa, and we'll talk about what that means to be a venomous snake in just a little bit. So here, if we're taking a look at the fox snake, we can see that they have a pretty good camouflage pattern. And so that means that their colors will blend in with their habitats. So they have kind of a light brown color with blotches or circles, or some of the markings look like stripes that are of darker color. So that helps them camouflage or blend in with their habitats, which is one way that they can protect themselves, because believe it or not, there are things that like to eat the fox snake. So now I understand that snakes may be a little bit of a scary animal for some of us. Maybe you've seen scary movies or seen scary pictures, or maybe you've had a little bit of a scary experience with a snake. And one of the things that I really like to do is teach the public about snakes, and kind of the more you learn about something, the more you understand it, and then maybe it's not so scary. Now, if you come across a snake out in the wild, because they are a wild animal, the best thing to do is to give them their space. I want you to imagine this. If a giant were to walk up to you and something 100 times larger than you, you would be afraid because it's so large. You don't know what it's going to do. Is it going to eat you? And that's what they're thinking. And so what snakes will do sometimes is get into this posture, and this looks like they are going to strike. And that's one scary thing that, they can do to make themselves look scary. They might hiss a little bit. The fox snake in particular will try to mimic rattlesnakes and try to get them to sound like a rattlesnake. They'll vibrate their tails, but they're not actually a rattlesnake. And they do not have venom. They're not venomous. So they try to make themselves look scary and sound scary to try to scare you or any other predators away. Now, if they can get away from you, they are going to do that. This is only kind of a last resort. Will they get into this kind of striking position or posture? And last resort, they might try to bite or strike, but they're going to get away from you if they absolutely possibly can. So to protect themselves. Now, when it comes to snakes are in kind of a bigger family of animals called reptiles. And if you joined us for the snapping turtle Critters Live, we learned about what makes reptiles different from other animals. Oh, I got a hi. Oh, my mom's watching. She says hello, and she does not like them. Well, I understand. Snakes are a little bit scary, but I hope you'll learn a little bit more and maybe be not so afraid of them. And remember, not all snakes are venomous, so they can't all hurt us. Most of them are pretty small. So snakes are in a larger group of animals called reptiles, and they have some characteristics about their bodies that make them different from other animals. One such characteristic that's very true for snakes is they have scales. All reptiles have scales, but snakes are kind of that animal that's well known for having snakes. Now, what I have here is a snake shed. So you can't see the whole thing. It's, let's see, from the head to the tail. It is, oh, somebody said good morning. Good morning, Julie. And so the snakes, as they grow, they have to shed their skin. Their scales are made from keratin, which is a protein, and it's the same thing that our fingernails and our hair is made from. So we have something in common with the snake, and as they grow, they have to shed this. And so what they'll do, they will start to rub their head, starting their head, on a rock or a log or something, and then their skin will peel off inside out. Kind of like when you take your gloves off or your socks and they turn inside out. That's how a snake's skin kind of shed off. And so when that happens, they'll have that bright new skin, and as they grow again, they're going to have to shed their skin again. Our snakes that live here at Lake Iowa Nature Center shed maybe about once a month or so. So it's not, not too terribly frequent, but it's really neat. I'm going to try to bring this snake shed really close up. The one really neat thing, this is actually their head. We can kind of see this is the top. And if you look very closely, you can see their eyes right here, there, and there. Though they have scales going over their eyes, which is really neat. And a snake's scales help protect the inside of their body. So their muscles, their organs, their bones. It's kind of like their skin, like we have our skin on the outside of our bodies. So all reptiles have scales on their bodies. Reptiles are also cold-blooded, which means that during this time of year when it's very, very cold, they are going to be hibernating. So they're going to find a nice warm, snakes in particular will sometimes hibernate together in groups of snakes called a hibernaculum. And they'll find a nice burrow under logs, down underneath water in the mud, in basements, anywhere that they can find some place that is a little bit warmer than the outside. And they spend the winter there resting. They might not necessarily sleep, but they're going to rest. They're not going to be too active until it's warm again and they can come out in the springtime because they're cold-blooded. That means that the outside temperature kind of reflects what their body temperature is. So in the warmer months, in the spring, summer, and fall, they are going to do something called basking, which means they will go out in the sunshine and they will find a nice warm spot and soak up those sun rays. That helps give them energy and helps them to be able to move around, to hunt and find food, and different things like that. So reptiles are cold-blooded. They have scales that cover their bodies, and most of them, I shouldn't say all, but most of them are egg layers. And so for snakes, there are some snakes that give live birth. So they'll give live birth to their babies, but most of them are egg layers. I just so happen to have a picture here of a snake that is laying eggs now. Snakes only have one opening called the vent. That's where their waste comes out, and that's where their eggs come out, which is kind of near the base, the end of their body, near the base of their tail. And I just so happen to have some reptile eggs right here with me. And these ones are not going to hatch. They are very dried up and kind of shriveled up just a little bit, but I want to describe reptile eggs. These ones are oval in shape. Some of them are more round, like ping pong balls. But reptile eggs are kind of hard and kind of a little bit soft. So bird eggs have very brittle shells. If you kind of tap them, they might crack because they're brittle. Reptile eggs are a little bit hard and a little bit soft, so I compare them to the feeling of a hard-boiled eggs. They give just a little bit. They're not quite as hard as bird eggs. And then amphibian eggs, those that start their lives out in the water, are soft and squishy like jelly. So reptile eggs are in between bird eggs and amphibian eggs. Almost all reptiles lay eggs. Some of them do give live birth. For snakes in particular, the types of snakes that give live birth are garter snakes will do that, and then rattlesnakes will do that. All other snakes will lay eggs. They'll lay eggs in kind of soft, moist woodland areas to keep them their eggs kind of moist, and just like all other reptiles and amphibians, when those eggs hatch, their young are on their own. They don't get any parental care at all, and they will look exactly like their adult parents, just a little bit smaller, or a lot smaller in most cases. So let's take a look at a close-up of a snake's head. And so they have really interesting anatomy, so different things on their head. They have big eyes. They do not have eyelids. They have those scales that cover their eyes, if you can see kind of in this close-up right here. They have 2 nostrils, one on each side, and they're actually not used for smelling. Anyone have any ideas? Those of you that are watching right now, what do snakes use to smell? I will give you just a couple of seconds to type that in. What do snakes use to smell with? It's not their nostrils. The way we use our noses, we sniff in, we bring in those invisible, those microscopic scent particles, and they go up into our nose and into kind of receptors here, and then to our brain, and that tells us what we're smelling. But snakes use their tongue to smell. Taking a look at this picture, when we see snakes a lot kind of flicking their tongue out here, they're using their tongue to smell. So they use their tongue the same way we use our noses. They collect those tiny little scent particles when they're flicking their tongue out. It's forked to have a little bit more surface area so they can collect those particles. And then they are bringing it inside their mouth. Yes, their tongue. Very good, Julie. So they're collecting those scent particles, and they bring it inside their mouth, and then they are using something called the Jacobson's organ. There's a special organ, and I have a photograph here that kind of demonstrates that. So there is the snake's head, and then inside, this is a really blown up big picture. Here's their tongue. Those tiny little scent particles, which are represented by these dots here, kind of go into this organ right here called the Jacobson's organ. And then there's nerve endings that go to their brain, and that tells them what they're smelling, just the same way we use our tongues to smell, right? So they smell. You'll see when I bring the snake out that he's going to be flicking his tongue out, trying to smell what's all around. So remember I said that some snakes are venomous, that means they're poisonous, and some snakes are not. The snake we'll be seeing today is non-venomous, so that means it's not poisonous. There are a few ways that we can tell the difference between venomous and non-venomous snakes, and I have some pictures here. One way is by looking at the shape of the eye pupil. And so the eye pupil has, in non-venomous snakes, is rounded. In a venomous snake, it is kind of a cat's eye, so it has a little bit of a slit there. Also, the shape of their head. With a non-venomous snake, it's kind of oval in shape. With a venomous snake, it is kind of diamond, or it's a little bit bigger, rounder. Now, with most venomous snakes, they have rattles on the end of their tails. With non-venomous, they do not have those rattles. But again, those non-venomous snakes, like the fox snake, will rattle its tail and vibrate its tail and to make you think that they are non-venomous. So those are just a few ways you can tell the difference between venomous and non-venomous snakes. We have 4 venomous snakes that live here in Iowa, but they are all very rare. They're all threatened or endangered, and they're not very common. After this post, or after this Facebook Live, I am going to put some information in the comments so you can go and research and learn more about all of the snakes that we have here in Iowa. There's some great resources and great websites out there that can help you learn what they look like, if they're venomous or not, different things that they eat. There's also a great publication. It's called The Snakes of Iowa that the Iowa DNR has made. This is a little bit of a dated publication, but it's a really great one with lots of great pictures and lots of information about snakes here in Iowa. So that's a great one. You can get that free from the Iowa DNR. Let's talk a little bit more about those scales. So here's a close-up look of scales on the snake. They cover their entire body. They can be a little bit of a different shape. These ones are a little bit pointed on the end. Some of them are more oval. Some of them are a little bit longer and more rectangular shaped scales. But they kind of lay over each other, providing that really good protective barrier of the skin. And some snakes have lots of different patterns when it comes to their patterns on the snake. And I just have a few examples here of some different patterns here. Lots of different patterns and colors on snakes, and I've kind of colored these so we can see these a little bit better. Some of them have uniform coloration, so they're all the same color. Some of them might have stripes, so they have narrow lines that go from their head to their tail. Some of them have rings that go all the way around their body, even on their belly. Some of them have diamond-shaped patterns on them. Some of them have something called crossbands, so it goes just on the top from their side to side. And then some of them have blotches, like the fox snake that we'll be seeing today. So depending on what type of snake they are, where they live, most of the snakes will have these patterns to help them, again, camouflage with their habitats, so they can be protected from predators or things that want to eat them. So just a couple of more pictures before I bring the live snake out here. So when we think about snakes, they are great to have around because they are, they eat rodents, lots of rodents, and lots of insects. And to do this, some rodents are pretty large compared to the snake size. So they have to have a special adaptation to their jaws. They can actually unhinge their jaw and stretch their mouths and body out a little bit more when they're eating. So here's a great picture of that. A snake actually eating a small rodent like a mouse or a vole or a shrew. They eat all kinds of rodents. Primarily that is their main diet. And so you can see in this picture that its whole body is kind of stretching out. And so what they'll do is they'll use their muscles and their teeth, and they'll push that food back into their mouth and then into their esophagus, into their digestive tract, and they will eat that and start to digest it. They don't chew, they swallow things completely whole. So when it comes to rodents, snakes when they're large, older, they will eat small rodents. When they're smaller and just learning how to hunt, they'll eat things like insects. And so because snakes are long and skinny, their internal organs look really, really interesting and really neat. And I happen to have a picture here that we can kind of just take a look at here. You can see that snakes, maybe I'll turn it this way so you can see a little bit better. Snakes are long and skinny. They have an esophagus, and then as we go down their whole entire body, their digestive tract stretches almost the whole length of their body, starting with their mouth and their esophagus, and then turns into their stomach, their intestines, and then eventually where their waste exits their body. But a lot of their other organs are going to be long and skinny too. For instance, their livers, their kidneys, and some of their smaller organs here. Because this animal is long and skinny, so do their organs have to be long and skinny. And then the most neat thing here, another kind of cool thing about the snake, they have lots and lots of bones in their bodies, starting with their skull, their head up here. And they have an incredibly long backbone, lots of little vertebrae that are stuck together with lots of little ribs that go the entire length, those vertebrae, the entire length of their body, their ribs almost the entire length of their body as well. And they are what helps protect some of the insides of their body. So their muscles and their bones protect those internal organs that are softer and more vulnerable. But they also help them to be able to move around, to be able to slither around, and their muscles as well. So those two things kind of combined help them move around. So I think we should bring out the snake here. And so this snake does live here at Lake Iowa Nature Center. And it is an educational animal, so we use it for education programs. The fox snake is a protected species, which means they do not, you cannot have them as pets. But you have to have a special permit and license to have them, and we have that here at Lake Iowa Nature Center to use these snakes for educational purposes, so education programs. And I'm gonna bring this guy close here to the camera so you can kind of see his head for just a moment. And you can see sticking out its tongue right there. Remember, it's using that tongue to smell the air. And if I were to stretch our snake out from the tip of his head to the tip of his tail, would be about between 3.5 and 4 feet long. So a pretty good size snake, a long snake. And taking a look at, and you can see that he is just on the move. They really don't sit still, especially if they're being held. Now, we use this snake for educational programs a lot, and it is pretty okay with being handled. I've never been bitten by this snake or anything like that, and that's because it has been in captivity for its entire life. And it was raised in captivity. Someone had it illegally as a pet, and it was confiscated by the Iowa DNR and then placed with us here at Lake Iowa Nature Center after it was, it couldn't be released back into the wild, and so we use that for education programs. Taking a look, you can see that he's staying pretty close to me. That's because I am a warm-blooded animal, right? But it's still kind of moving around a little bit. It's using its strong muscles, its internal skeleton to help it move around. And it's just kind of sniffing the air, smelling the air, kind of on the move, but staying pretty close to me. It does have a very large enclosure here at Lake Iowa Nature Center, and in there it has lots of places to hide underneath and in, has a nice little water dish, and we feed our snake frozen mice that we get from a mice hatchery, and they are sent to us frozen, then we thaw them when it's time to eat for this snake. And if you've watched our Facebook Lives before, you may have seen a video of this snake actually eating one of the snakes. And maybe I'll put a link to that in the comments here so you can see that again if you've missed that one. So taking a look at the coloration of the fox snake, you can see it has those patterns or those blotches on the upper part of its body to give it camouflage. They like to be in areas like forests and prairies, places that are kind of brownish, so they blend in really well. The underside is a little bit of different color. It kind of looks a little bit like a checkerboard. There are black and white patterns there on the bottom. And the snake scales on the bottom, I'll kind of give you a close-up here, are long and rectangular. They're hard but smooth and tough because this is the part of the body that touches the ground. And the scales that are on the sides, I'll give you another close-up look here, are oval shaped. They're still tough. They kind of fold or go over each other to provide that protection, but they are not as smooth as the bottom scales because, again, this is the part of the snake that touches the ground when it is moving, right? You can see definitely on the move here. Let me give you a little bit more of a close-up of the head, and we can take a look at those eyes, those characteristics that make it a non-venomous snake. So let's see if I can bring them up here. Those round pupils. The head shape is a little bit oval in shape. There's the tail right there. There's no rattle in the end. So those characteristics tell me that it is a non-venomous snake. And this snake is a constrictor, which means when it finds its prey, let's say a mouse, a rodent, it will ambush, it will grab with its mouth, and then it will use its strong muscles to squeeze until that rodent cannot breathe anymore. And that does sound a little bit gruesome when we say it that way, but I want us to think about it. So a lot of us like to hunt, and we like to eat meat. We either hunt and harvest our meat that way, or we go to the grocery store and harvest our meat that way, or we have a farm and we have animals that we harvest and eat that meat. These guys just have to go out, find their own food, and that's how they harvest their food. And I always ask this question too when I'm thinking or talking to people about snakes. Rodents are something that we do not like to have around in our houses, on our farms, in our barns, different things like that. And so they eat tons of rodents. They also eat lots of insects when they're smaller snakes. And so they help us out quite a lot by eating those pest populations that we do not like to have around. Would you rather have like several rodents, or would you like to have one snake? So that's all I have to share a little bit about the fox snake today. If you have any questions about the fox snake, please put those in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them for you. Also, if you have any requests for future Critters Live, you can put those in the comments or email me at mbulger@co.iowa.ia.us. You can also look at all of our past Critters Live on our Facebook page or our YouTube page, which is just search Iowa County Conservation on YouTube. And then we also have another series, the Virtual Craft Series, or Virtual Nature Craft Series, that we've been doing lots of fun outdoor activities with snow and ice this time of year. And we'll have another one coming up this coming Friday morning at 10 a.m. So join us live for that. Thanks very much for joining us today, and have a wonderful week. Stay warm. If you have to go outside, make sure you dress in layers and dress warm. We will see you a little bit later in the week. Bye-bye.